The morning Oliver Hatch almost walked past, the girl would stay with him for the rest of his life. Though he wouldn't know that until much later, when he was sitting alone in a hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights and wondering how a single Tuesday had undone 47 years of careful living. He was running late. That was the first thing. Oliver didn't run late. His assistant Marcy had been with him 11 years and could count on one hand the number of times he'd arrived anywhere after the agreed hour. But the 6:15 out of LaGuardia had sat on the tarmac for 40 minutes, while a maintenance crew inspected something nobody would explain, and by the time Oliver's black car pulled up to the Meridian Hotel in downtown Cincinnati, it was already past 9, and he had a breakfast meeting at 9:30 with 3 city councilmen who were deciding whether Hatch Development would get the contract to redevelop 16 blocks of the old manufacturing district along the river. $72 million. That was what was on the table. Oliver knew the number the way he knew his own heartbeat. He pushed through the revolving door, phone already at his ear, rolling his carry-on with the focused efficiency of a man who had learned long ago that the world moved faster when you didn't slow down to look at it. He almost didn't see her. She was standing just inside the lobby, near the base of the grand staircase, holding a paper coffee cup that clearly hadn't come from the hotel. Her coat was a man's coat, far too large, the sleeves rolled up 3 times, and it was the particular gray of something that had once been another color. She was maybe 10 years old, maybe 11. Her hair was tangled at the back in a way that suggested she'd slept on it wet, and no one had helped her brush it out. She was watching the elevator bank with an expression Oliver could only later describe as dread. He passed within 4 feet of her. "Sir," he kept walking. Marcy was saying something about the council member's assistant rescheduling to 9:15. "Sir, please." Something in the voice stopped him. Not volume, she was barely speaking above a whisper. Something else. Something about the flatness of it, the absence of hope that made the word "please" sound like it had been said 100 times before, to empty air. Oliver lowered his phone. The girl was looking directly at him now. She had dark eyes, the kind that seemed too old for her face, and she was gripping that paper cup so hard the lid had cracked. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know you don't know me, but please don't take that elevator." Oliver looked at the elevator. The doors were closed. The display above read L. "Why not?" he said. He heard himself say it and was vaguely surprised. Normally he would have kept moving. The girl's jaw tightened. "The cable makes a sound." Before it, she stopped. "My mom said I was imagining it, but I'm not. I've been listening to it for 2 days and something is wrong with it." Oliver looked at the elevator again, then at the girl. 2 days, he said. "We're staying here. Room 412. She said it quickly, like she'd prepared the detail in case he needed proof she belonged here. "I know it's a nice hotel. I know I don't look like I should be in a nice hotel." We're not usually." She stopped again, swallowed. "My mom got a job interview. It's the first one in 8 months. She saved up for one night so she could come looking right." Oliver stood very still. Marcy was still talking in his ear. He pulled the phone away and said, "I'll call you back," and ended the call before she could respond. "What's your name?" he said. "June." Then, as though she'd been corrected on this before, "June Alderman, Oliver Hatch." He extended his hand. She looked at it for a moment, surprised, he thought, that he'd bothered, and shook it. Her hand was cold. "June," he said, "have you told the front desk about the elevator?" 3 times. The man at the desk said I was being dramatic. She said the word dramatic, the way children repeat phrases adults use when they don't think the children are listening. He said the elevator was inspected last month. Oliver looked across the lobby to the front desk, where a young man in a hotel blazer was chatting with a bellhop. Then he looked back at June. "Okay," he said, "show me what you mean." He didn't take the elevator. Not because he fully believed a 10-year-old girl had diagnosed a mechanical fault that the hotel's maintenance team had missed. More because, and he would think about this later, try to pinpoint where the instinct came from. There was something in June Alderman's face that made him want to take her seriously. She wasn't performing distress. She wasn't asking for anything. She was simply passing on information she believed to be true, with no expectation that it would be received. He walked with her to the elevator doors and she pressed her ear against the panel to the left, the way a doctor uses a stethoscope. After a moment she straightened up and looked at him. "You have to wait for it to move," she said. When it comes down it does this grinding sound, right at the end, like something catching. They waited. The display ticked from 4 to 3 to 2 to L, and Oliver stood with his carry-on handle in his fist and his 9:30 meeting ticking like a clock in his chest. And he heard it. A sound like a coin dropped into a drain. Brief, metallic, wrong. June watched his face. "I'm not imagining it," she said again. "No," Oliver said. "You're not." He walked to the front desk. The young man, his name tag read Derek, straightened up when he saw Oliver's suit. Oliver had learned years ago that a certain quality of suit changed the texture of conversations, and he used that fact now without particular pleasure. "I need to speak with your facilities manager," he said. "The elevator requires inspection before anyone else uses it." Derek blinked. "Sir, our elevators are inspected last month." "I know." Oliver set his business card on the counter. "Call your manager now, please." He waited. June stood slightly behind him, still holding the cracked coffee cup, watching with those two old eyes. The facilities manager arrived within 4 minutes. His name was Terence, and he had the look of a man who had learned to stay calm in front of hotel guests, even when he wasn't calm. He listened to Oliver. He looked at June. He looked back at Oliver. "I'll have someone look at it," he said. "No," Oliver said with a patience that was itself a form of pressure. "You'll take it out of service until someone looks at it. There's a difference." Terence looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Oliver's breakfast meeting started 11 minutes late. The councilmen were gracious about it, or performed graciousness, which amounted to the same thing, at 9:30 in the morning. He shook hands and smiled, and talked about mixed-use development and community investment and sustainable infrastructure, and somewhere behind all of it, a part of his mind was back in the lobby with June Alderman, watching her press her ear to an elevator panel. At 11, as the meeting was winding down and aides were stacking folders, Oliver's phone buzzed with an email from hotel management. "Mr. Hatch, we wanted to inform you that following your report this morning, our maintenance team identified a worn tension pulley on elevator B that required immediate replacement. We have taken the unit out of service and are grateful for your attention to this matter. Complimentary upgrades have been applied to your room." He read the email twice. Then he called Marcy and asked her to find out what room June Alderman's mother had booked, and whether June had anything to do with the front desk conversation about the elevator this morning. And Marcy said, "Oliver, I can't just access hotel guest records." And he said, "I know, I'm asking you to try anyway." And she sighed in a way that meant she would. Marcy called back in 20 minutes. She had spoken to Terence, who had apparently been told by Derek that Oliver would be following up, and Terence confirmed that a Ms. Alderman in room 412 had checked in the previous evening on a single-night reservation. Oliver went upstairs at 12:15 when his morning calls were done. He knocked on the door of room 412, feeling, for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, more nervous than he had in the boardroom 2 hours ago. A woman answered. She was maybe 38. She had June's eyes, same dark shade, same quality of having seen too much, and she was wearing a blazer that was pressed and professional and a half size too large for her shoulders. Her hair was done carefully. She looked, in short, like a person who had spent considerable effort, appearing not to have spent considerable effort. "Mrs. Alderman," Oliver said. "Miss," she said, with a reflex that suggested she'd corrected this before. "Can I help you? My name is Oliver Hatch. Your daughter spoke with me this morning about the elevator." He paused. "She was right, by the way, about the cable. There was a mechanical fault. Hotel maintenance confirmed it an hour ago." The woman stared at him. "June told me she reported it 3 times, Oliver said. Nobody listened to her." A complicated series of emotions moved across the woman's face. Pride and grief were both in there, Oliver thought, and something that might have been exhaustion so deep it had stopped feeling like exhaustion and started feeling like weather. "She's been telling me too," the woman said quietly. "I told her she was nervous about the trip and it was making her hear things." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I told her she was being dramatic. She mentioned that," Oliver said. The woman opened her eyes and looked at him steadily. "Why are you here, Mr. Hatch?" It was a fair question. Oliver had asked himself the same thing in the elevator, the other elevator, the one on the east side of the building, on the way up. "I don't know entirely," he said. "I wanted to tell her she was right, and I suppose I wanted to know." He stopped. "Try it again." "She said you had a job interview." "I did." The woman's voice was level. This morning. 9 o'clock. How did it go? A pause so slight that a less attentive man would have missed it. I don't know yet. They said they'd call. She said it the way people say things when they don't want to hope too loudly. Her name, Oliver would learn, was Kathleen. Kathleen Alderman, 36, younger than he'd guessed, the way difficulty ages people, who had grown up in Akron, gotten a degree in civil engineering from Ohio State, worked for 9 years at a mid-sized construction firm in Columbus, until the firm downsized and she was, as HR put it, restructured out. That had been 14 months ago. In that time, she had applied for 87 positions. She had gotten 4 interviews. She had sublet her apartment after the 3rd month, moved her and June in with her mother, and then her mother had needed to move into a care facility, and after that it had been, as Kathleen described it in a voice stripped of self-pity, a series of increasingly creative arrangements. He didn't learn all of this immediately. He learned it in pieces over the next 2 hours because, after he knocked on the door of room 412, something entirely outside his usual operating parameters occurred. He asked Kathleen Alderman if he could take her and June to lunch. She said no. He asked again, not pushily, just steadily, the way he'd asked Terrence to take the elevator out of service. She said yes. June ordered a grilled cheese. She said this with complete seriousness, studying the menu with the focused attention of someone accustomed to making choices that need to last. She ate it methodically, one triangle at a time, and mostly listened while the adults talked, though occasionally she would offer a precise, unprefaced correction to something Kathleen said. It was 11 months, not 14, or no. The firm in Dayton replied, "We just didn't hear back," which Kathleen received without irritation, only a slight nod that seemed to say, "This is what she does, and I have stopped being surprised by it." Oliver watched the two of them together. There was a specific texture to how they occupied the same space, a closeness that was less about warmth in the usual sense and more about attunement. They knew where each other were at all times. They finished each other's sentences, not in the finishing each other's sentences way of contentment, but in the way of people who have spent a long time in small rooms together. "You're a civil engineer," Oliver said. Kathleen looked at him over her water glass. "I was. You still are. You haven't stopped knowing what you know." She considered that for a moment. "The job this morning," Oliver said. "What was the position?" "Infrastructure firm." She paused. "It's a step back from where I was, but it's a foothold. Who's the firm?" She named it. Oliver knew the name. He didn't say he knew the name. "What would it take," he said, "for you to get back to where you were?" "Not a foothold. The actual position." Kathleen put down her water glass. Her expression was careful and not particularly warm. "Mr. Hatch," she said, "I appreciate the lunch. I genuinely do. But I'm not looking for charity." "I know you're not," Oliver said. "I'm not offering charity. I'm asking a professional question." He paused. "Hatch Development breaks ground on a riverfront project in 60 days. We have a project manager who left us for a competitor last month. The person we hire needs to understand civil engineering and construction timelines, not just spreadsheets. What would it take to get back to where you were?" The silence lasted long enough that June looked up from her grilled cheese. "That's a real question," Oliver said. "I know it's a real question," Kathleen said. "That's why I'm not answering it yet." She looked at him steadily. "I don't know you. You've been kind today and I'm grateful for it, but I've had people be kind in a way that costs them nothing and means nothing." She said it without bitterness, simply as fact. "Fair," Oliver said. "Tell me about the project," she said. He told her. All of it, the 16 blocks, the mixed-use vision, the political complications with 2 of the 3 councilmen, the budget, the timeline, where it was already behind and why. He was more candid than he would have been in a meeting. He wasn't entirely sure why. She listened the way engineers listen, not for the emotion in what's being said, but for the structure underneath it. Twice she asked questions that surprised him. Once she pointed out a sequencing issue in the construction timeline that his own project team had missed and framed it as a question so he wouldn't feel corrected. He noticed that. He noticed it and filed it. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. "The sequencing issue," she said. "At the foundation stage, if you shift the concrete pour on building C by 3 weeks and run it concurrent with the site prep on D rather than after, you recover 11 days on the back end." Oliver looked at her. "I'd need to see the full schedule to confirm," she said. But that's my instinct. My project manager said that was structurally impossible. Your project manager was wrong, she said it evenly. Do you want me to explain why? He said yes, she explained. Correctly, he was almost certain, though he'd need his engineers to verify. June finished her grilled cheese and asked the waiter for a refill on her lemonade with the same precise courtesy she had demonstrated in every other exchange Oliver had witnessed, and Oliver thought, not for the first time that day, but more clearly now, this kid listens to everything. She's been listening her whole life. He did not offer Kathleen Alderman a job over lunch. He was careful about that. He took her business card, a card that was slightly bent at one corner and had a cell number that he suspected was not the same one she'd had 2 years ago. And he said he would be in touch, and he meant it in the way that he'd learned to distinguish from the version of "I'll be in touch" that meant nothing. What he did instead, he called his head of talent, a woman named Patrice, who had been recruiting project managers for 20 years and had a gift for reading people that Oliver trusted more than almost any instrument he owned. He described the conversation he'd had with Kathleen. He didn't lead with the personal circumstances. He led with the sequencing question. Patrice was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Send me her resume." "She hasn't sent me her resume," Oliver said. "Then ask for it." He texted Kathleen that evening. "Would you send me your CV? Our talent lead would like to review it." 3 minutes later, Kathleen replied, "I'll send it tonight. Thank you." Then, 30 seconds after that, June wanted me to add, "She says thank you for taking her seriously this morning. I'm saying it too." Oliver sat in his hotel room with his phone in his hand, and the city lights of Cincinnati laid out below him, and he thought about a 10-year-old girl pressing her ear to an elevator panel in an empty lobby, passing on information she believed to be true with no expectation that it would be received. He thought about what it takes to keep doing that. To keep telling people what you know is true, even when they look at your coat and your tangled hair and call you dramatic. He thought about the number of times in the last year he had looked at someone and not seen them. Not out of cruelty, just out of speed. The elevator technicians, it turned out, had found more than just the worn tension pulley. There was a secondary issue with the braking system, a fraying guide rail that the monthly inspection had flagged as monitoring required and never escalated. The hotel's maintenance director told Oliver this in an email that was apologetic in tone and careful in language, the language of people composing documents with lawyers in mind. The elevator would have failed, the director said, within the week, maybe sooner. Oliver did not send this information to June. She was 10. She didn't need to sit with that, but he thought about it for a long time. Patrice called back the next morning. "She's qualified," Patrice said, which from Patrice meant considerably more than the word suggested, more than qualified. The firms she worked for, I know 2 people who hired out of that Columbus office. Good people. The economy did what the economy did. And the gap, Oliver said. People have gaps, Oliver. Patrice's voice had an edge that he recognized as the one she used when she was trying not to say "stop being obtuse." The gap doesn't worry me. The experience does the opposite of worry me. The question is whether she wants it. "I think she wants something real," Oliver said. "She was very clear that she wasn't looking for charity." "Good," Patrice said. "Because I'm not offering any. I want to interview her. Real interview. If she can do what her resume says she can do, we have a conversation about the river project." Oliver arranged it. He felt, doing so, a faint unease that he examined carefully, the way he examined all his motivations when he was doing something that deviated from his usual pattern. He wanted to be sure he was acting on what he'd observed. Kathleen's competence, June's precision, the sequencing insight, and not simply on the guilt of a man who had walked past a child 3 times in his life and only noticed her once. He thought he was. He thought the evidence was real. But he held the question open, the way you hold a door open when you're not sure which way the wind is blowing. Kathleen Alderman's interview with Patrice lasted 2 hours. Patrice called Oliver afterward and said, in a tone that she used approximately 4 times a year, "Hire her." That was all. Just hire her. The offer letter went out on Thursday. Kathleen called Oliver directly when she received it. He had half expected her not to. Expected, maybe, a formal reply through Patrice, keeping the professional boundary clean and correct. Instead, she called at 6:40 in the evening, which was when Oliver was still at his desk, which was almost always. "I've read it 3 times, she said. I keep waiting for the part where it's not real. It's real, Oliver said. A pause. Not the calculating pause of someone deciding whether to negotiate, which Oliver knew well. Something else. My daughter saved you from a broken elevator, Kathleen said. I want to be clear that I know that's where this started. And I want you to know that I'm not going to perform false modesty and pretend I haven't earned what's in this letter, because I have. 9 years of earning it, and then 14 months of watching it mean nothing. I have earned it. Her voice was steady. But I also know that none of this happens if June doesn't stop you in a hotel lobby at 9 in the morning. That's true, Oliver said. So, she seemed to be gathering something. Thank you for stopping. Most people wouldn't have stopped. Oliver looked out the window of his office at the Manhattan skyline going dark in the west. He thought again about the morning, the phone at his ear, the rolling carry-on, the focused efficiency of a man who had learned not to slow down. I almost didn't, he said. He heard her exhale. I know, she said. That's why I'm thanking you. The Meridian Hotel's elevator B was out of service for 9 days. Oliver learned this from a follow-up email, which he was fairly sure had been sent by someone in the hotel's legal department, rather than Terence, though it was signed with Terence's name. He didn't think much about the elevator after that. What he thought about was the lobby. The girl in the oversized coat, the cracked coffee cup held in both hands. He started walking to his morning meetings when the weather was decent, slower than the car. He couldn't have explained why, exactly, except that he had begun to feel, in a way he hadn't felt in some years, that the distance between one place and another was worth something. 6 months later, Oliver was in Cincinnati again, this time for the groundbreaking ceremony on the riverfront project. The sequencing issue had been resolved the way Kathleen had outlined over lunch, which had in fact recovered 11 days and impressed his engineers enough that 2 of them had gone slightly quiet when told a project manager candidate had identified it from a 15-minute conversation. Kathleen was at the ceremony. She was wearing a hard hat and a jacket with the Hatch Development logo on the chest, and she was talking to the city's lead infrastructure liaison with a directness that Oliver could see across a construction site. The liaison was nodding. Kathleen was pointing at something on the plans. June was there too. Oliver hadn't expected that. Patrice had mentioned bringing kids to the groundbreaking was fine. It was a community event, but he hadn't assumed. June was standing a little distance from the crowd, near the river, looking at the water with the same quality of attention she had given the elevator panel 6 months ago, like she was listening for something most people would walk past. Oliver went to stand beside her. What do you think? He said. June looked at the site, the raw earth, the survey flags, the orange fencing, the beginning shape of something that wasn't a building yet. I think it's going to take longer than they're saying, she said. Oliver laughed. It surprised him, not the laugh but the quality of it, unguarded. You might be right, he said. You usually are. June looked at him, the 2 old eyes the same as her mother's. Then she looked back at the river. My mom is good at this, she said. It wasn't a question and it wasn't asking for anything. Just information she believed to be true, passed on with no expectation that it would be received. I know she is, Oliver said. The wind came off the water and moved through the survey flags and rearranged June's hair in the way that hair gets rearranged when no one is managing it, and she reached up and pushed it back with one hand, and it was such an ordinary gesture, so completely a child's gesture, that Oliver felt something ease in his chest that he hadn't known was tight. Thanks for not walking past me, June said. She said it casually, like a piece of information rather than a sentiment, still looking at the river. Oliver watched the water move. Thank you for saying something, he said.